Welcome to episode 3 of Tips and Tricks for Manuscripts. This one will be covering storytelling tactics. Now, in the first 2 episodes, we covered the basics as well as establishing a theme. So now we're going to go into a little more detail of your characters and the physicality of bringing your story to life. So let's see. First bit we're going to cover is describing your world and your characters. Naturally, that's going to be the backbone of your story. How you start is really going to set everything up for the rest of your book. And if you can't manage to make something appealing about the first 10, 20 pages of your book, chances are really good that your reader's going to put it down. Now, I'm not saying you want to put the most exciting thing possible in the first 10 or 20 pages of your book unless it serves its purpose. Unless it is your purpose to, say, start off with a middle of a battle. Large-scale battlefield war type situation, that's all well and good. But not a lot of stories are going to start out that way. So you have to find a way to balance out the introduction of elements in the beginning of your story to interest your reader. So starting out, where does it begin? What world are you in? Is it a desert? Is it a forest? Is it a valley? Where are you? And one thing I've learned over the years of writing is to introduce the elements of your world that you've built a little bit at a time, gently. It's not good to give your reader so much information in the beginning that it overloads them. It's going to frustrate them. It's going to confuse them, and they're not going to enjoy the story as much if they if they choose to keep reading. So you're going to want to find a balance of addressing the world that your characters are in, where you begin. So just for an example, say you start in a field at night. First you discuss the time of day. What's the sky look like? What's the weather? And then you work your way down to where you are, to where your characters, or if your characters are even there, where they're standing. Say they're knee deep in tall grass. Okay, is it cool? Is it hot? Just give the basics. It's a meadow at night in the autumn. The air is cold and wet, and there's a breeze that just makes it colder. Simple things. Start out simple, with simple language, and give gentle servings of your terrain, because there'll be plenty of time to get in touch with the rest of your world later. You're going to want to be a little more tender when you start, especially if you got a big book ahead of you. So don't overload your reader, and just give them a little bit of time, and they'll catch on. The same thing can go with characters. Just don't give them too much at once. That's a good rule of thumb, is to just find a balance with what you give them in terms of anything. You can't give them too much plot at once. You can't give them too much descriptive paragraphs of terrain and or people at once. So I guess the real crux of this tip is just find a balance. Don't overload your reader, but do your best to find something that will garner their interest. Let me see if I can think of it. Here's a good example: like a clandestine meeting at night. It's a wonderful starter, but it's not so much that it'll overload your reader, give them too much information, or ruin a mystery for them. Just give them the bare bones minimum of what they need to form a picture and a basic starting point of the plot of what's going on. So be kind to your reader, and don't shove it down their throat, or else they're not going to have a good time and they're not going to come back. Let's see. Describing your characters. A lot of people follow similar patterns when describing the character. Depending on what kind of scene this character comes into, they're either going to describe them from top to bottom, or from the bottom up. I've used slightly different tactics myself. Not to say that those two are wrong, but it helps to vary your language and your writing style by using different techniques in how you describe a character. Like picking a detail of them that stands out, something that no one's ever seen before. Let's just say you have a character who's missing an ear, and that's the first thing that the character that is seeing them notices. So you're going to work from the ear to the face, and most likely down. So, but there's also other ways to avoid those mainstays, is working from the inside out. I'm not saying describe their guts, but say that they're wearing a particular ornament or their suit of armor is very unique. You're going to work from the chest out, but usually you're going to end with the head. That's in terms of that, you're either going to start or end with this person's head. So in ways it's kind of hard to avoid that, but it's usually the most logical thing to do is to end or start here, because as humans, our eyes are in front, so technically we're predators. We judge by what we see. Regardless of what anybody says, we judge by what we see, because that's simply how we're wired. So you're most likely going to begin or end your analogy of someone with their face, if you can see it. And if it's not their face, then it's going to be whatever's covering it. So if you have a character wearing a mask or a helmet or some kind of bandana, something covering an eye, say they got an eye patch, or just or facial hair, those things are going to draw a lot of attention. Simple fact. So it's a good place to start and end, but feel free to start and end wherever you want, so long as you follow a consistent pattern that the mind can comprehend. That's just usually how humans are wired. They have to start in one direction and keep going when they're looking over someone. Is they have to start from one and go to the end and then start again. There has to be consistency for someone to remember. So those are some tips on how to do it. I'm sure everyone is going to find their own way, but it's simpler for the writer as well as the reader to follow some sort of consistent path to describing your character, be it from the top of their head to their boots or from hand to hand, and so you'll find your own way. But those are some examples of tips and techniques that you can use to find it. Let's see. I think we'll continue with character traits. I know we covered this in the previous episode, studying personality types to determine what kind of character that you're working with. Well, now we're going to look at the physicality of your character building. And of course, this depends a lot on theme. But one thing that I didn't cover is how their appearance can affect descriptive paragraphs concerning them, the kind of adjectives you use. Because much like theme and voice pertains to your genre, theme and voice can also pertain to your characters and your word choices and your sentence structures. So if you have a big, very muscular or fat, it can be muscular or fat or both. You're God. You figure it out. There are words that you can use that have a particular sound to them that follow the physique of that character. Like if you have a big-bellied character, rotund. That is a very round-sounding word. So, and of course, everybody interprets the sounds of words differently. Even the meaning is always going to be the same. The sound of a word is different. Like in terms of a reptile, if it makes a sound, oftentimes you're going to use really harsh words like shriek or shrill or screech, to describe the sounds that they make, because they're very rough-edged and very abrasive creatures for the most part. Even if they're smooth-skinned, it's easy to use hard words to describe their physicality. Unless, of course, in those odd moments like you have tortoises or, what's a good word for it? Or worms. That's W-Y-R-M. They tend to be smooth-skinned, though very firm, very hard-shelled. So you can use a mixture of hard and soft words for creatures like that and characters like that. And it can also be used in body type. You have someone tall, you're going to use words that sound tall. Towering, looming, dwarfing. Or with smaller characters, you're going to have demure, petite, short, lithe. So, stringy or lanky. So it depends on the physique of your character is really going to influence the kind of words you use. So reading a thesaurus is a really good idea. If you don't have one, you can find one. You can always get a pocket one almost anywhere. Any bookstore is bound to have one. I have a pocket one and a full-sized one, so you can see how often I use them. I haven't read them much, though. So, the physicality of your character can really influence the kind of adjective you use in regards to them. And even their type of voice can influence the words you use. Because there's a word for everything. You just got to find it. And sometimes, like in my case, or in William Shakespeare's case, make a word. Invent a word. If you have a really good grasp of the English language, you can fake words. So easy. So, it's really, once you have a root word, or basically the basic meaning of a certain word, and combine it with the basic meaning of another word, you're going to get the word you need. So, as long as it makes sense, and it follows certain grammatical rules and phonetics and so on, it's easy to make a word. So, if you can't find one, make one. Just use it sparingly, because it is a made-up word. People are going to bust you for it. So don't get carried away with your made-up words. They're good as a seasoning, not as a main course. At least until you get established, like Dr. Seuss. Like, maybe that's not the best example to use. He made up almost all the words he used, but he did it in a fashion that you could accept it as truth. So that is a really good example to use. If you can form your made-up words in a way that people believe it, more power to you. But like I said, have a little control over how much you use them, because that could really backfire on you. Let's see. Again, researching personality types, it's going to help you to establish behavioral patterns. So let's just say you have a, let me think. Let's say you have a character with a phobia, okay, but they have a very rational, down-to-earth personality type. How do those two elements conflict? Study people who have similar problems, the reactions, because some reactions, especially to fear, can be very constant with human beings, but also very, very extreme in how different they are. Some people, when they're presented with their phobias, seize up. They'll faint. They'll start just crying uncontrollably, or go into seizures or anxiety attacks, nervous breakdowns. Everybody's different in how they respond to fear, but some elements are always true to form, such as heart rate spikes, adrenaline spikes. Chemistry of fear is constant with almost everyone, but it's how we react to that chemistry that makes us different. So really consider how people react in conjunction with the personality types that you've chosen, and study real people that are presented with similar issues, and it'll really help you to flesh out your characters and make storytelling in regards to them a little easier. It'll help you decide, their relevance to plot, to certain events, to each other. That's another big thing, is how characters react to each other, how their personality types, clash and complement. So that is really going to add life to your story, is when you can make your characters as believable, as relatable as possible for your audience. They're going to have a much better time receiving your work if they can find someone like them, or someone like someone they know. So it really helps them immerse themselves, and like I've said before, the more you can immerse your reader, the more likely they are to come back if you come out with something new. And that's what we want. We as writers want people to respond to us and return for another helping. Let's see. And one of the methods that I've learned to use from the beginning is I've called it the A to Z tactic, the A to Z method. Is when you basically have all those cornerstone elements down, your theme, your genre, your character roster, those important things are done. You go about forming your story. What happens, what's the point, what's the plot. And one way I've helped myself establish basically what it is setting my goals. I find a concrete, fully fleshed out way to begin. Where do I start? And I basically play out the beginning in my head to the point where I have all the characters introduced, along with the main goal of the plot. Where's this supposed to come out? What is this supposed to accomplish? And then I completely skip the middle and decide how it ends. That way, I have some constants. For me personally, I have to have constants. I have to have structure when I work. So if I have a concrete beginning and a concrete end, I can build to where they meet. And that has been a serious help in how I write, is that I have my starting point and I have my goal. Otherwise, it gives me a playground worth of options to decide how I get from one to the other. Some people can't work like that. I used to not be able to work like that. I have to have all the steps planned out, but I found that restricting. I found that I could not think as freely, and thus my ideas were not as fluid. I would keep building inconsistencies with the plot and with the story, so I had to stop doing that and just reduce it to having a fixed beginning and a fixed end, and leave the rest to my creative instincts and my discretion. So that might be a technique that you could use. Let me see. A lot of these, they're not cut and dry answers to all your problems. They're basically just things to help get the ball rolling, things for you to build on yourself and find your own way. So I'm not a solution for everything. At least my advice isn't. It's just basically what I've learned that I want to share with you guys and help you find your own way. I'm just a street sign. I'm not the road. But that covers everything in this episode. Quick recap as always. Describe your world and your characters gently. Don't overload the reader. Don't give them too much at once. It'll help keep their mind open and help them keep reading. Characters are often described top to bottom or bottom to top. It's easy to find your own way to, well, okay, maybe not easy, but simple to find your own way to describe your characters, but it still has to follow a path. It still has to follow a pattern. There has to be some logistics to it. So take care with that. Character traits and how they pertain to adjectives. Just get a really good picture of what your characters look like in your head, and use your author's instinct to really decide what adjectives best fit them. I mean, what do the words sound like? What is this person? What does their physicality sound like? What kind of lines and measures does it follow? And it'll help you find your words. And it's good to do research on psychological articles regarding personality types. It's going to really help you gauge your character's behavior and how they interact with each other and with the events that you put them through in your worlds. And then there's the A to Z method. Concrete beginning, concrete ending. It leaves your middle empty and free to do with as you please, so long as there is consistency between 1 and 2, A and Z. So, yeah, that pretty much covers all of this episode. If I didn't cover anything that you really were curious about, or if you still have some questions, leave them in the comments section. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And if I don't answer them, reply to the comments, I'll try and get them in the next video, which will be episode 4, Heroes and Villains. So hopefully I'll see you there. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you on the flip side.